Hi guys, I'm here to go through Chapter 9 of the Real Estate Principles and Practices textbook for you. So we are talking about real estate brokerage here. And most real estate brokerages, I know a lot of people think of the mega brokerages, but in reality the majority of real estate brokerages are very small and are made up of entrepreneurs. And even when we have the larger mega brokerages, many times those are franchised and operated as smaller entrepreneurial type businesses. So all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, license and regulate the activities relating to brokering real estate and the real estate professionals involved with those. As we talked the very first week, the real estate license laws are not created so that all of you are better and successful real estate salespeople and or brokers. What they're created for is to protect the public. This again, when somebody buys a house or other property, it's usually one of the largest purchases that a person is going to make in their life. And so this is basically big government making sure that the regular folk are taken care of and that they're protected from unscrupulous people who may take advantage of them in this situation. So what they do in all 50 states, the purpose of all of this is to establish basic requirements for obtaining the license, and also the requirements or creating requirements for maintaining it, which usually include some type of continuing education type of requirements. It defines which activities have to be licensed, and it describes acceptable standards for conduct within the profession, and also provides for enforcements of violations and remedies relating to all of those. So again, the main objective is to make sure that the right of purchasers and lessees and tenants and owners are all protected from the negligent practice or people who are purposely going out and trying to take advantage of people. Each state has its own licensing authority. In Ohio, it's the Real Estate Commission backed up with the division, but every state has its own licensing authority. And those licensing authorities set up administrative regulations that have the full force and impact of law as if it were created by statute by the Congress. But in the event there is a discrepancy between what the Congress, the statutes that they created, and or the regulations that a state, local authority, commission creates, then the statutes will control. So the definition of brokerage, which you'll need to know for the exam, is basically a person or an entity that's licensed to buy, sell, deal in, exchange, lease real property that belongs to another for a fee. So a couple of things in there is any type of transaction with real estate, and it's real estate belonging to another person or another entity, and it is for a fee. So basically, brokerage is basically just the business of bringing people together or entities together to transact a real estate type of transaction. So a licensed broker in any state can take the form, any legal entity form that they want. They can be an individual, sole proprietor. It can be an LLC, a limited liability company. It can be a corporation, a subchapter S corporation, a partnership. Any legal entity or single proprietor can form a brokerage. Now, a lot of these brokerages, as we talked about at early part of this, are smaller, and their main focus is perhaps a website, and a lot of people may be operating and working with that brokerage as sales agents out of their own homes, but every brokerage has to have a physical address, and it has to have a sign outside of the building, wherever that physical address is, advertising that they are a licensed brokerage. You will need to know that for the exam. So every brokerage needs a physical address with a sign outside advertising that they are licensed. So if, I know one particular broker that happened to go to high school with my husband, and he has operated as his own brokerage for a long, long time, and he's always operated out of his home. Now, at times he's had some sales associates working with him, at other times it's just been him, and he's moved a number of times, but because he operates his business out of his home and he is a broker, he has to have a physical sign in his front yard or posted on his house indicating that he is a licensed broker. Let's see. So let's just talk about some practicalities as it relates to operating a brokerage. In addition to knowing your product, i.e. real estate, and knowing the market for the particular area, and knowing just generally what the economics of everything are as it relates to real estate. As a broker, you also have to be an entrepreneurial. You have to hire and fire people. You have to keep all of the paperwork taken care of. You have to take care of all of the accounts. You have to do training. You have to determine compensation. You have to provide guidance to your staff, whether they're licensed or not. So there's a lot involved with being a brokerage. I know a lot of you may have aspirations to be a broker, and that's a great thing. You can make a lot of money being a broker. There's also just a lot of complications, paperwork, bureaucracy that needs to be taken care of. And if this is your ultimate goal, that's great. If you're not good at some of that entrepreneurial stuff, you just get a partner or somebody to work for you that you trust that is good with all of that stuff. All right, so let's talk about the relationship of a broker and a sales associate. So a sales associate differs from a broker in the fact that he is licensed as a salesperson, and he works with or for a broker. In the traditional definition, a real estate salesperson is licensed to perform most, if not all, of the real estate activities that a broker does, but he's doing it on behalf of the broker. The broker who actually hires or engages the salespeople is called the employing broker. You should be aware of that term for purposes of the state exam. And they actually sign an employment agreement with the salesperson licensee. Now, in Ohio, I think it's rare that a salesperson licensee is anything but what we call a 1099 contractor. And the 1099 contractor, it's important to know that that's really for tax purposes for the IRS and for the state. And unlike a typical employer where they take out federal, state, local taxes as well as Social Security, a 1099 independent contractor, none of that stuff is taken out. Your commission checks will come to you at the full level, and sorry about that. And then you're responsible for putting aside your own taxes. But for the purposes of being a salesperson, you will sign some type of employment contract with your broker and your employing broker, and that will set forth all of the standards, including the fact that you're a 1099 person and that they will not be taking out taxes. But you do need something in writing. So for purposes of going forward and for the rest of the class, we'll talk about a sales associate as being a licensed agent who works for an employing broker. And when I talk about a broker, I'm just talking about a broker who is an employing broker. Okay, so let's talk about vicarious liability. That term is not in the book. I'm not sure if it's in your legal book or not, but you should be aware of what that term means for the state exam purposes. Again, it's vicarious liability. And that basically means that one party is responsible for another party's actions and is liable for that. So if you are a licensed salesperson who works for a broker and you do something that's out of line, provided it's within the scope of work that you've been assigned to do in your employment contract, then your broker is vicariously liable and liable to any third parties for your actions. So a broker does care when they're interviewing you and deciding whether you're an appropriate person for them for a lot of reasons. One, they want to make sure you're motivated and you're going to go out there and work and hopefully be a very successful agent and make some money for them. But they want to make sure also that you have all of the necessary training to understand what your responsibilities are and what the fiduciary duties that you owe your clients, because if you violate those, not only can you be sued on an individual basis, but the broker can be sued as well. And again, that concept is known as vicarious liability. Okay, so now let's talk about what a managing broker is. And I'm on page 144 of the book. A managing broker is the party or person that is responsible for supervising all of the people that's reporting to them. If you have a very small brokerage and you only have one office, usually your managing broker is your employing broker, which is the ultimate broker. In my situation at Star One, we have 9 separate offices throughout 3 states. So I have our head broker is located at our corporate office, and then each specific office, including my office that's located in Montgomery, has what's called a managing broker. And that broker or person or individual is responsible for the supervision of all of the real estate salespeople who are centered out of that specific office. And they're responsible for supervising them, providing guidance to them, helping them through any issues or concerns that they may have. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the independent broker versus being an employee a little while ago. Just know that in Ohio, most always, it's you as a sales agent are going to be a 1099 contractor, which is also known to be a independent contractor. And per the IRS, there's 3 things that you need in order to be deemed to be an independent contractor as a sales rep for a broker. And this will likely be on the exam. They're the 3 bullet points that are set out on page 145. So the individual must have a current real estate license. The individual must have a written contract with a broker that specifies that the individual, i.e. the salesperson, will not be treated as an employee for federal tax purposes, i.e. no taxes withheld, and including Social Security tax. And the third is a substantial portion of the salesperson's income as a real estate professional must be based on sales production. And so that basically relates to you getting paid your commission instead of an hourly rate or a base rate. So again, that is something you probably should be aware of for the state exam. Let's talk about real estate assistance. I don't think you're going to be tested on this at the state level, but a lot of agents, successful long-term agents who have seniority, engage a personal assistant or a professional assistant to help them. They are usually not licensed, and they are basically a manager, a coordinator. They may assist with some of the marketing, and they just relieve some of the day-to-day administrative, secretarial type functions away from the real estate professional. Okay, let's talk about broker's compensation. That's usually specified in the listing agreement with the seller and or the buyer's agreement if you happen to sign one with the buyer. And that compensation can be based on a number of things. Typically what I've seen is it is again a percentage of the sales price. What Star One does, well, I better not say this because I don't want to be charged with violating the antitrust laws, but we have a set percentage in our listing agreements that we identify, and that is based upon the sales price, so that upon an actual sale, then the broker, not the salesperson, the money's owed to the broker, gets paid that percentage commission. Other ways you can do it is flat fees, and I've sometimes seen that, and you can also charge hourly, which I've never seen in recent history or within the state of Ohio. So also, sometimes sellers, buyers don't need the full assistance of an agent or a broker. They just want them to perform a particular function. And depending upon the state's law, and Ohio is okay with this, then you can get paid for performing a particular function. But always clear that with your individual managing broker at your broker's office. We talk about multiple listing service briefly, which is MLS, the acronym that everybody uses. And with the MLS, then, we just advertise, all brokers advertise the properties that they have for sale with all of the other brokers and the agents in the area. So a broker's commission is considered earned when the work for which the real estate broker was hired has been accomplished. The most likely time that gets paid is at the actual closing. That's different from when it's deemed to be earned. And the only time that really comes into consideration is if there's a time where the seller or buyer perhaps is alleging that they're not going to pay, or they don't pay you, or the deal crashes for some reason. So most listing agreements and buyer's agreements will say that the commission is payable upon closing, assuming that there's a successful closing. And it will also provide when it's payable in other particular situations. So to be entitled to receive compensation in connection with a real estate transaction, an individual, again, must be a licensed agent or a licensed real estate, not an agent, a licensed real estate broker. They have to be employed by the buyer or seller pursuant to a valid contract, and they have to be the procuring cause. Please memorize what the word procuring clause means. You will definitely need to know that for the exam. And it is on page 147 of your textbook, and the highlighted section in the left-hand margin says, to be a procuring clause, the broker or the broker's sales associate must have started an uninterrupted chain of events that resulted in a sale. So a procuring clause does not mean that broker or the broker sales agent has done everything from the beginning to the end. It simply means they've started that chain reaction. So it has to include activities such as if you've conducted an open house, if you've placed an advertisement in the local newspaper or social media, if you've put the sign in the yard. Any of those can be deemed to be a procuring clause. So cause, I keep saying clause, it's procuring cause. And then once a seller accepts an offer from a ready, willing, and able buyer, the real estate agent is entitled to a commission and earns that commission. Again, for the exam purposes, you need to understand what ready, willing, and able means. And again, it's in the left-hand margin on page 147 of the textbook. It says a ready, willing, and able buyer is one who is prepared to buy on the seller's terms and is ready to complete the transaction. So, if you are a licensed real estate broker and you've been employed by a buyer or seller pursuant to a written contract, and you are the procuring cause, you've started a chain of activities, then and you've found a ready, willing, and able buyer. Again, that means somebody who is basically has signed a contract and is able to pay the money and is able to close. Then you have earned your commission. So let's think about an example. If you sign a listing agreement with somebody, a seller, and they said they want to sell their house for $210,000, and you've had open houses, you've got it on MLS, you've listed, you've got a sign in the yard, you're reaching out to people to see if they're interested in buying it, and out of one of those avenues, a buyer's agent has brought in a buyer and basically submits an offer, and let's just say it's for $210,000, the asking price. So you take that to your seller and you say you've got an offer at asking price. If the seller starts asking you questions, perhaps let's just say they're violating the fair housing law and they want to know the race or ethnicity of the buyer. You explain to them that you're not able to disclose that, and that those questions that are being asked by the seller is violating the fair housing law, and you cannot support that, and that they could actually be sued for doing that. In that situation, if they refuse to accept the offer based solely upon you not disclosing their race or ethnicity, then you have deemed to have earned your commission. Because you have brought that, you've been the procuring cause, and you've brought them a ready, willing, and able buyer that is based upon the seller's terms. So that's a situation where you advise your client to proceed without asking those questions, and if they fail to do that, you've earned your commission and you can sue for it. And let me back up. You can't sue for it. Your broker can sue for it, because remember, the listing agreement is between between the broker and the seller, or the broker and the buyer. It is not between you. So you have to go back to your broker, explain the situation, try to resurrect the deal, and if it doesn't work out, then your broker has to elect whether they're going to proceed to sue for the broker's commission. Thanks.